Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Hayomi Nedarim Daf Chav Vav. We are holding on Chav Hey and Beis, and perhaps let's just back up to the beginning of this piece in the Gemara, which is about 10 lines from the bottom of the Amid. Ra'a Eisan Eichan. Tanan Hasan, we have learned in a Mishnah elsewhere. A fellow took upon himself, by way of a neder commitment, to refrain from, say, wine throughout the entire year. The Chacham will start asking him, well, did you anticipate this hardship? That this neder will make it hard for you to actually, properly observe Shabbos and Yom Tov? Well, you meant to enjoy, you meant to partake, rather than refrain and restrict. So we use that as a release mechanism. Now, what happens to the rest of the year? So, Barishona, initially, they would hold that those specific days, Shabbos and Yom Tov, become mutar by the way of using this Pesach. Right? So the Chacham is mater Shabbos and Yom Tov. Usha'ar kol hayamim asurim. But the rest of the day, the rest of the neder, which pertains to all the rest of the days of the year, remains intact, remains active. That was the initial way of thinking. Rabbi Akiva came along and taught us, no, it's all or nothing. Neder shehutar miktsasai, hutar kula, if a heter was applied to part of the neder, the entire thing falls, and actually we learn it from a pasuk mentioned back on Naf Gimel or Beis, Kol Hayotzim and Pivias, and the Ran explained B'Shem Di Rishalmi. That is the source for this concept. If you can keep to the entire commitment, Kol Hayotzim and Piv, then Yasa, go ahead and do it. But otherwise, if even part of it becomes batal, the entire thing falls by the wayside. That is Shittas Rabbi Akiva, which is in line with the Shittas Beis Hillel in the Mishnah, in that story where he saw a group of people standing around his figs, and he said, well, guess what? Going forward, you are usher in those figs. Then he comes to realize that amongst the group there, he finds, amongst those people, he finds his own father standing there. And it turns out that he was mistaken in applying a neder to his father. So that becomes mutter. It's called nidrei shegaga. It's a mistake. But according to Beis Hillel, the entire neder pertaining to the entire group becomes null and void and well in line with this concept of neder shebatal mitzvah batal kulei. Whereas Beis Shammai disagreed. Father becomes mutter. Father is accepted. He's a sort of he's out of the neder. But the rest of the neder pertaining to the other people still stands. We're going to have two ways to explain this discussion, this machlekes. Amar Rabba. Rabba chooses the more stringent approach. The Kuli Amma, all will agree, meaning even Beis Hillel, or Rabbi Akiva, if you will, who hold that another Shabbat Miktsasai Batal Kulei, will agree in the following case that wouldn't apply. Only the part that's taken out of the neder, the part that becomes mutter, but the rest stands. So back to the case where he noticed a group of people congregating around his figs. It's usher on you. Turns out that his father is standing there amongst the other fellows. And he has a change of heart. He says like this. When he says, had I known that my father is standing with you, I would have specifically left my father out of the neder. I would have said, you see, what he said was, Kulchem asurim. You all of you, as a collective group, are asur. I would have made sure to exempt my father, to single him out. I would have said, Hayisi Omer, kulchem asurin. I would have kept the actual language. I still would have addressed you as a collective entity. All of you are asur, but I would have added an exemption clause to my father. Chutz mi abba, except for father. Everybody except for father. So initially, he addressed them as a group. All of you are asur, kulchem asur. And even now, when he's sort of regretting what he did, he's only regretting the fact that he didn't exempt his father. He would have said, all are asur except for father. In this situation, says Rabbah, even Beis Hillel would agree that kulan asurin v'aviv mutar. Although father is mutar, that's nidrei shagagais, it was a mistake. I never meant to include him. But the rest of the group, the rest of the bunch are still asur. Why? Because I'm not really changing much from the original presentation. I said kulchem asurin, I still would have said kulchem asurin. Only difference is, I would have singled out my father as an exception. That is not a drastic enough shift or switch in the neder format, which justifies the concept of batal kulay. Father is exempted, but that doesn't affect the rest of the neder, because I would have stuck to the same language, as I said before. There was no change in terms of the rest of the group. When do we have a machlekes? Meaning, when does Beis Hillel say that just as father becomes mutar, everything becomes mutar? That's when there was a drastic shift, a drastic switch in language, which not only pertains to father, but affects the way I relate to the rest of the group as well, to the entire format of the neder. Had I known my father was there, I would have switched everything. The content, the format, the presentation, the language, the packaging, the internal and the external. Had I known my father was there amongst you, you know what I would have said? I would have packaged it so differently. I wouldn't have wanted even for a second that anybody should even think that perhaps I'm relating to my father. I'm including him in the neder. I would never have even used the term kulchem, which can be for a split second a misleading term, which would indicate that father is included. No, I would have kept far away from that. That's not kibbutz aim. I would have said it differently. I would have done it individually. I would have individualized my neder. Ploini, Uploini, Ruvain, and Shimon Asurin. Va'abba mutar, father is mutar. In this case, explains the Ran, it was a double toes, a double mistake. A, in terms of content, I should have excluded father. If I would have known he was there, I would have taken him out of the neder. So regarding father, we have a mistake. But not only that, we also have a mistake in the way he relates to the rest of the subjects. Instead of using the term kulchem, I would have individualized it. So the fact that he was unaware about father's presence triggered another mistake in the way I packaged the entire neder, in the way I formatted the neder. And therefore, Beis Hillel hold. In this case, we say, just as father becomes mutar, that heter sort of spreads. The whole thing was just packaged wrong, was presented wrong. The whole thing is mutar. And Beis Shammai would disagree. Of course, they hold that we never say hutar miktsasi hutar kulei. Father is mutar, of course, but the rest of the group is us. So according to Rabbah's approach, it's more of a strict approach than Rava coming up in a minute. When there was just a single shift in terms of content, I would have left my father out of the neder, then that's not enough reason to me mavatal the entire neder, and the neder stands regarding the rest of the group. But if there was a double switch, one regarding content, I would have left my father out, and two regarding format, I would have reformulated the entire neder instead of a collective packaging. I would have individualized it to ensure that father is not even for a moment understood to be included. In that case, we have machlekes. Beis Shammai says still, the rest of the neder stands, and may still hold, the whole thing is bought. V'Rava Amar, Rava took a more lenient approach to the sugya. The Kuli Amo. All agree, meaning even Beis Shammai would agree. In this case, it's mutter. Had I known my father was there, I would have switched my presentation. I would have said, Pliny Asur V'Abba Mutter. You and you are Asur, my father is mutter. I would have individualized it rather than presenting it collectively. So there was a double switch, a double shift. I would have, number one, taken out content, my father. Number two, I would have reformatted. I would have done it differently regarding the rest of the group as well. I would have said, Pliny Asurim V'Abba Mutter. So instead of saying, Kulchem Asurim, I would have said, Pliny Asur, and Abba's Mutter. In this case, all agree. Even Beis Shammai agrees, Kula and Mutarim, everything becomes Mutter. Because there was a total toss in the entire neder. So the mitzvah, which becomes Mutter, affects everything. When do we have a machlekes? When do Beis Shammai consider the rest of the neder still to be standing, still intact? Ela b'omer, when there was just a single shift in terms of content, not in terms of packaging. Ilu hayisei de'ash Abba b'neichem. Had I known a father was there, I would have said it slightly differently. I would have stuck to kulchem, addressing them as a collective entity, kulchem asurin. But I would have said chutz ma'abba. I would have left my father out. Here we have a machlekes, Beis Shammai Savala Karab Meir. So the Ram brings, there's a machlekes and Tmura, totally different topic. So he has an animal standing there. He says this animal should be a Tmura, sort of an exchange, transfer. The Kedusha of the Oila and the Shlomim should descend, should extend themselves onto this animal. Which one? Oila or Shlamim? Pick your choice. It's sort of a contradiction. How do we deal with this? Rabbi Meir says, whatever you said first, that's presumed to be really your wish. Whatever you say first. So, Tmuras Oila, Tmuras Shlamim, we pick the Oila. Rabbi Yossi says, no. The conclusion is really what counts. The last and final say. So in this case, it was Tmuras Oila, Tmuras Shlamim, we pick Shlamim. The Gemara will compare, sort of apply the concepts that we find there to Nedarim as well. So initially, when he saw the group, he said, all of you are Asa, Kulchem Asur. Now he's coming back and saying, I would have said it differently. I would have stuck to Kulchem Asurim, so in terms of the first part of my expression, it would have remained unchanged. But I would have added another clause to exempt my father from the neder. What happens now? Do we focus on the fact that he made that change, that sort of shakes up the entire neder, the second half of his expression, or do we focus on the fact that he would have kept the first half of his expression, kulchem, intact? In which case, we just leave the neder intact. That's the machlekes in our sugi as well. Beis Shammai Sabri Lok Rab Meir. Beis Shammai follow Rab Meir's concept. The Amar Tfois Lashon Rishon. We pick the first thing that you said. We dwell and focus on the first part of your expression. And in this case, what is the first part? Well, he's saying, look, had I known father was there, I would have stuck to Kulchem. I would have still addressed them as a collective entity, but I would have added, except for father. So since part number one of your expression would have remained unchanged, intact, we focus on that. That's the ikar of your expression. There's no reason to nullify the rest of the neder. Whereas Beisila follow Rabbi Yossi's concept, the Omar who says, Bigmar Dvar of Adam Nitfas. We focus and dwell on the latter part of a person's expression, the conclusion of his words, the final word. In our case, what is he saying? Had I known father was there, I still would have said, well, all of you are Asa, but I would have added a clause, except for my father. We focus on that, on the second part. That's the punchline. And that's a shinui, that's a change, that's a shift and a switch from the earlier commitment, from the earlier expression of neder. So the entire thing is now revamped, entire thing falls apart. So, in summary, before we continue, regarding Neder Shabbatal Miktasa Batar Kulei, when do we apply it, when don't we? According to Rabbah, that was the first track, the first more strict approach, when he's pretty much sticking with his original language. Ma'amid, the Ran calls it Ma'amid. He's sort of just letting it stand. He's just switching some content. I would have, mentioned my father as an exception, but I would have kept to the same lashon. I said kulchem asurin, I would have still said kulchem asurin. In this case, there isn't sufficient reason to nullify the entire neder. But by mishane, where I'm totally switching everything, I'm taking my father out and I'm switching the entire language regarding the rest of the group as well. So we see the tos affected everybody. In this neder, we say it's batal kulei. According to Beis Hillel, right, that's the machlekes. Beis Hillel say batal, Mishami insists no batal. Rava takes a more lenient approach, even when there was just a slight shift, a one-item shift. In terms of content, I included father, I should have excluded him. In that case, we have a machlekes, as we just explained. The Beis Hillel look at the second part of your statement. You would have taken father out, you would have changed the content. That's enough to make a hutar kulei. And certainly when it's mishana, when he's totally switching everything. What do you mean? I would have taken my father out, I would have reformatted the entire neder so that there is no inkling at all, there is no, impression at all that I'm trying to include my father. I would have individualized it, I would have personalized it. You're us, yours, except for father. That drastic switch in the entire content and format of the neder justifies application of the concept of neder shebatal miktsasa batal kulei according to all shittas. Asks the Gemara Kasha on Rava. A svei Papa Rava. We have a halacha which is really the continuation of the Tanan Hasan that we had before. With Rabbi Akiva, right? Keitzat Omar Rabbi Akiva Netar Shehuda Mitzasi Hutar Kulei. Give me some other examples where Rabbi Akiva would contend partial nullification generates full nullification. Let me have some examples. Here come 3 examples in the Bryce. By way of neder, I am usher to have a noah from all of you as a group. So he addresses them as a collective entity. And what happens? He runs to the Rav, who applies hatoras nedarim with respect to one of the members in the group. What happens to the rest? Everything falls by the wayside. That's case number 1. Batal kulei. Remember, this is Rabbi Akiva speaking. He holds neder shebahutar miktsasa hutar kulei. Case number 2. She'eni nene lo lazeh v'lazeh. This time he individualized it. No hana from you. The same halacha applies. Hutar harishon, hutar kulam. So one becomes mutter, everything becomes mutter as well. Case number 3. Hutar achrin, in some other type of case. We're not really understanding it yet. We're going to get to it later. In this case, we say it's different. If one of them becomes mutter, ha'achrin, mutter, he's mutter, but everything else still stays. V'kulan asur, and everybody's asur. So we seem to have 3 cases in the Bryce. That's the way the Gemara understands in the Havamina. Case 1, part mutter, everything mutter. Case 2 as well. Case 3, no. The one that's becoming mutter, fine, but everything else is us. Now, we can understand this Bryce according to Rabba's approach to the sugi, the most strict approach. He'll interpret the Bryce as follows. L'reisha, the first half of the Bryce, the first 2 cases in the Bryce, the Amar lezeh. This fellow is now contending. We're speaking of the same type of case, that he saw a group of people standing around his figs, he makes his figs usher, and then he figures out that his father is there. Upon discovering his father, he says, look, why did I use the word kulchem asurim? I would have said lezeh lezeh. I would have totally switched the entire wording of my neder to ensure that even for a second it is not perceived as though my father is included in my neder, which of course is disrespectful. So in the first half of the brisa we have two variations, so to speak, of this total switch, this drastic shift, what we call the double shift before, the double switch, both in terms of content and in terms of format, in terms of choice of words. So, in the first example, he said, all of you are awesome. He discovers his father. He regrets. He has second thoughts. I would have taken my father out. I would have singled him out, accepted him. Number two, I would have said it differently. Initially, I would have said lezeh, lezeh. I would have individualized it instead of alluding to everybody as a group, which perhaps gives the impression as though I'm including my father, at least for those few seconds until I exempt him. That drastic switch, that double switch, in terms of content and format, justifies bittul haneder completely. In case number 2 of the brisa, it went the other way. But again, there was a double switch that occurred, a double shift in terms of content and formatting. In this case, the Ran explains, he had addressed the group individually. You can't have my figs. Nor you. Not realizing that his father was there, he just, individualized it. All you can't have my figs. Upon discovery of his father, he says, look, what did I do? First of all, I would have left my father out. That's clear. So in terms of content, I made a big mistake. Number 2, I would not have even individualized it. Here comes a svara the other way. It's just a different perception here. He's unhappy that he individualized it, because then the Ran explains it takes a while till the casual observer or listener will hear those words where he accepts his father, where he exempts his father. You can't. Oh, Dad, you could. It takes a while to get to there, and that gives the observer a sort of an impression, a false impression, that this fellow is about to include his father as well. So he has to wait, it's a bated breath, until he gets to his father. That takes a while. I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have done it clear and open right away. All of you are usher except for father. That's just a couple of words, straight to the point. So it's just the opposite of the way we explained it before. But both can be true, depending on your perspective. One fellow can opt individualizing it, which preempts any perception that father is included. The other fellow can opt for individualization. The other fellow can opt for the collective expression, because it just goes quicker. All of you except for father, instead of singling out and naming every person until he gets to the father. So again, just to recap, the first half of the brisa, which contends that according to Rabbi Akiva, partial bittul of neder generates full bittul, is speaking where there was a drastic shift from the initial until the current, a double switch. Number 1, I would have excluded father. That's number 1. Number 2, in terms of format, and we have 2 variations. Case number 1, he said kulchem asurim. No, I would have said lezeh lezeh to preempt any impression that I'm including father. In variation number 2, he said lezeh lezeh, but that was a grave mistake. I would have said kulchem except for father. So in those situations, that double switch generates a hutar kuli, as opposed to the seifa, in the last case where the brisa does not apply hutar kuli. The amal kulchem was speaking that he didn't make much of a shift in terms of his initial and current. Initially he said all of you kulchem, And even now, he's sticking to that. I would have still said kulchem. I have no reason to change that. Only thing I would have changed is I would have accepted my father. I would have taken him out of the collective group. That's only a single toast. That's not sufficient grounds to be involved in the entire neder. And again, this is Rava's approach. Only a double shift justifies, whereas a single shift doesn't. So according to Rava, the brisa fits like a glove. 3 cases, each one with its own set of rules. El Didach asks the Gemara, according to you, Rava, who adopted a more lenient approach to the sugya. And according to you, when there's a double shift, there's no machlekes. All agree. Batal kulei. It's only when there was only a single shift in terms of content, but not in terms of language, in terms of format. Then Rabbi Kiva and Beis Hillel hold batal kulei, and the other shittas disagree. So according to you, how do we understand the cases of the Bryce? Eladidach, according to you, let's break it down step by step, case by case. B'shlema reisha. Let's go to the first case. Rabbi Kiva says, batal kulei. Right, but only Rabbi Kiva, not the Rabbana. And that's the mandamar of the Mishnah here. Can you please tell me can you find me a case where it's only Rabbi Kiva who says batal kulei? B'shlema reisha mukim l'adam l'kulchem. Who's speaking that there was no drastic switch. Initially he said kulchem asurim, and even now he says, look, I would have exempted my father. I would have taken him out of the neder, but I still would have said kulchem asurim. So he has no reason to switch the language. He's okay with kulchem. The Ran calls it ma'amid dvarav. He sticks to his original language. So being that there was only a slight shift, only a slight toast in terms of content, only Rabbi Kiva would say hutar kuli on that. Okay, so that's good. Elas seifa. What about the next case? Lazeh. The Brisa says, once again, Rabbi Kiva considers the whole neder null and void. Apparently, he was speaking that there was some sort of drastic switch. Because if you're just sticking to the same old language, and that was the first case, no reason to repeat the same type of case again. So apparently, in case number 2 of the Brisa, there was a double shift, a double switch. A, in terms of content, and B, in terms of terminology, in terms of language. In case number 2, apparently, what happened was, initially he said, all of you are so kulchem asurim, and now he switched. He said, well, if I would have known, my father was there, I would have taken him out, number 1. Number 2, I would have worded it differently for kibbud avayim. Question is, a double switch is batal, according to all shittas. Isn't that Rava's opinion? Drastic switch justifies total bittul. Rabbi Kiva, it's only Rabbi Kiva who applies bittul. Amai. Pligi Rabban. Why would Rabban even disagree if it's a double switch? Well, Amris, haven't you yourself told us when there's a double switch, divrei hakol mutar? All agree that the whole neder falls by the wayside. That's a kasha according to you. So bottom line is, at this point in the Gemara, the Havamin of the Gemara, the Brisa discusses 3 separate cases. So according to Rabbah, we explained case number 1 and case number 2 to be speaking where there was a double shift. He would have left his father out, so it's a content mistake. And also, he would have packaged it differently, more respectfully. In the first case, he said kulchem, he would have said lazeh lazeh. In the second case, he said lazeh lazeh, he would have said kulchem. So that double switch justifies a bittul according to Rabbi Kiva only. But we haven't really explained case number 3 yet. That's coming up soon. According to Rava, we have explained case number 1. Why does Rabbi Kiva say it's batal? We're speaking of Ma'amid. He only has regrets in terms of content, but not in terms of packaging. He would have stuck to the same old lashon kulchem, kulchem. Problem is, in case number 2, apparently there was a switch in terms of terminology. So that's tantamount to a double shift. According to Rava, all agree. Such a drastic shake-up of the neder justifies nullification. And that's where we're holding right now. Amalei Rabba, Rabba responds. 1 second, Ola Rabba. What about Rabba's opinion? Rabba's approach to the Brisa. Is that really going to work? What about case number 3? We haven't yet addressed case number 3. Even according to Rabba's approach, how are we going to explain the Brisa in accordance with Shittas Rabbi Akiva? The Mishnah meaning Seifa b'may mukim lo. What about the last case? Last case says, well, when the achroin becomes mutter, only the achroin is mutter, nobody else. Da'ama l'kulchem. Apparently, the reason why the rest of the neder stands, even according to Rabbi Akiva, it's because there was just a single shift in terms of content, but the lashon remained intact. He stayed with the same lashon that he said initially, kulchem. Okay, so far so good, but let's take a look at the wording of the Mishnah. In one case, the Mishnah says the Rishon became mutter, and the other ones, and then it says Achron became Haydein hu Rishon. Who's the Rishon that we're talking about? Haydein hu Achron. Who's the Achron? Why does the Mishnah make reference to the first and to the last? What does that have to do with anything? It's totally irrelevant. There's no first or last. It's a group of people. It's a question of whether, when one person becomes batal, the whole thing becomes batal or not. What does that do with first or last? So even Rabbah sort of stuck to explain the Bryce properly. Ella says the Gemara, let's back away from the entire presentation. Let's reinterpret the entire Bryce. Reisha de Amal Kulchem. There are two parts, two distinct parts to the Mishnah. In the first halacha, he said Kulchem. He didn't switch his format. Initially, he said, all of you are Asur, and now he's sticking to the same lashon. He has no reason to switch, to modify his language. He's just saying, look, upon discovering my father, I would have, I would have said my father wasn't included. That's all. But in terms of the rest of the Chaver, in terms of the rest of the group, I would have still referred to them as Kulcha. Okay? So what's the halacha? And this is Rabbi Akiva speaking. The entire neder is batal. Why? Okay, so it depends. Rabbah would say that there was a double shift there. In order for Rabbi Akiva to nullify the entire neder, apparently there wasn't a double shift. There was a double shift. I would have taken out some content and I would have changed the lashon regarding the rest as well, and that justifies a bittul neder. But me, Rava, I would hold no. We don't need a double shift for Rabbi Akiva to apply hutar kulei. Simply exempting my father would be enough justification, enough grounds to minvat the entire neder. So that's the ratio. It's batal because he said kulchem. Rabbi has his approach to kulchem. I have my approach to kulchem. It's good. That's it. It ends right there. The seifa. Now the next part of the Bryce, case number 2 and 3, discusses an entirely different concept. Nothing to do with groupings and exceptions, and therefore it's unrelated to our discussion, and all the kashas fall away. The seifa kugan should tol on zebazeh. He saw a bunch of people. He said, you know what? You're Asr, and you're Asr. And he totally separated the Nedarim. He didn't group them. It wasn't one collective Isser applied to all. V'amar plaini kiplaini. But then when he got to number 2, he said, you're Asr, and you're Asr like him. Kiplaini. Fellow number 3, you're plaini kiplaini. He sort of made like a chain there, like a domino effect, with the later one depending on the earlier one. Now we understand the Mishnah. So what happens if somebody in the middle becomes mutter? It's like a domino effect. Everything behind them falls apart. They could not be. In fact, the wording of the Mishnah is very clear that we're speaking about such a case. This nan, hutarem tzoi, the fellow in the middle of that line becomes mutter. Hey menu lamata mutter, and everything behind him is mutter. It's like a domino effect. Hey menu lamala sur, and anything above him, before him, is totally not dependent on him, so it's asur. That's all the Mishnah is speaking about. Nothing to do with groupings and changing of Lashonis. So that puts this kasha to rest. Says the Gemara, I have another kasha on Rava. Eisvei Rav Ada bar Ava Rava. Again, Rava is the one who tells us that when there was just a single switch in terms of content, that is enough for Beis Hillel and Rabbi Akiva to make a total bittul. Whereas according to Beis Shammai, we don't say bittul here. Beis Shammai goes with Rav Meir's concept. We focus on the first part of your expression, and since the first part remains unchanged, you would have accepted the father, but the first part would have remained unchanged. We keep it intact. Here comes a kash. I'm generating an isser on onions. It's unhealthy for my heart. They turn to him. True, ordinary onions are harmful, but this wild growing, organic, some sort of other onion is perfectly fine. It's actually beneficial to your heart. Hutar b'kufri. He never meant this type. He mutter to have that. But here comes the catch. V'loy b'kufri b'lvad hutar. The heter doesn't just apply to the kufri, rather the entire system collapses. Ela b'chola b'tzalm, everything becomes mutter. Masahaya, in fact it was a story. And who was mater? Rabbi Meir. V'tiroi Rabbi Meir b'chola b'tzalm. So Rabbi Meir is the one who generates the entire heter here. Why? I would never have included this strain of onion. True. But why is that sufficient grounds to nullify the entire neder regarding the other onions? My lab apparently was speaking. Let's assume was speaking to Amar. So initially he said everything is asur, all onions, and then he switched slightly. The Amar, he says, comes back and claims, if I would have known this medical fact, the kufri is fine, I would have left that out. I would have said, I would have stuck to the original presentation. Everything is asur. The kufri muta, I would have singled out the kufri. So it's just a switch in terms of content, not in terms of formatting. Now, if Beis Shammai and Rabbi Meir are sort of on the same track, Tfais Lashon Rishon, we focus on the first part of your expression, which in this case remains unchanged. I said all, I would have still said all. I would have just, mentioned the honorable mention to the kufri, but I was stuck to the lashon. So why would everything be mutter? Says the Gemara, no. We're speaking that he's shifting entirely. Had I known that kufri is fine, I would have switched the entire presentation. I would have said it differently. Lest anybody think that I'm gonna make a complete ban, I would have singled everything out. But so plainly asur, and this type and that type is asur, kufri mutter, the kufri is mutter. So there was a double switch in terms of content and terminology. And that explains why Rabbi Meir considers the entire ban to be null and void. There are two ways to learn now. Rabbi Meir libid Rabbi Akiva. So either Rabbi Meir is paskening here like Rabbi Akiva, and this is, if you hold that even when it's a double switch, we still have the machlekes. It's only Rabbi Akiva that's matir. That's Rava's shita. Sorry, that's Rabba's shita, a more strict approach. That when there's a double shift, even when there's a double mistake, we still have the machlekes. So Rabbi Meir, who's matir, is Rabbi Akiva. Or Vali with the Rabban, or according to the other approach, which is Rava's more lenient approach, when there's a double shift, all shitas nullify the entire neder. Vali with the Rabban. Okay, so in conclusion, a fellow made a comprehensive ban. He comes back and is matter part of it. Machlekes, whether we say neder shebatal mitzasa batal kuloi, part of it is batal, everything is batal. Based on a pasuk, kol yotzim pivyas. We have two approaches. Rabbah is more strict. When it's ma mitvara, when he only switches some content but he keeps to the same packaging, all agree, the rest of the neder stands. It's unaffected. When it's mishana, when he makes a double switch, that's when we have the machlekes. According to Rava, When it's just a single switch, that's the machlekes. When it's a double switch, so there was a double tos. A, in terms of some content, and B, in terms of the way I relate to the rest of the group, all agree, batal mitzase batal kuli. We had two kashas. We started with the brisa, which had three cases. Initially we figured, well, it works according to Rava, but not according to Rava. Rava comes back and says, well, case number 3 won't work according to anybody. So we switched the way we understood the brisa. Case number 1 is speaking there was some sort of switch, single switch or a double switch, based on how you learn. Whereas the second half of the brisa discusses a totally different concept. You made separate Nedarim, but you were toila, you were hinged. You depended the later one on the earlier one. What happens now? You treat it like a domino system. The first one becomes mutter, everything follows suit. Whereas if the last one becomes mutter, and only his mutter, everything else remains intact. And we conclude with another kasha, which we provide an answer for. It works according to all shittas, Rabba or Rava. Bezos Hashem, to be continued tomorrow. Be well and much hatzlacha to you.